There seem to be a lot of questions about quieting the mind or controlling the mind. How do I quiet the mind? I'll go over in a second what the mind is. And there might be, attempt to be, or appear to be, techniques and methods that one can do, such as meditation, yoga, focusing on the breath, any myriad of activities to quiet the mind. And in past talks, there's been a mention of science showing that we don't control our thoughts. They just arise. And if you take a second, and we'll leave some empty space here, notice when a thought arises. So we'll just take a quick second. Okay, so a thought arose, or maybe it didn't. Congratulations. Maybe multiple thoughts arose. Where did they come from? Where did those thoughts arise from? They came from, the mind saying, hey, they came from the mind. And the mind doesn't exist. It's no more real than the thought of a bowl of ice cream. And yet you don't walk around your day feeling full from thinking about ice cream. Feeling is the feeling of the sweetness of ice cream. Yet we put so much stock into the mind and this mind that apparently exists, which is just a bundle of thoughts. We give it so much power. And part of the power that we give to the mind is thinking that we can control it or quiet it. And there is so much frustration that comes with these, that can come or that appears to come in terms of messages received, that I just can't stop my thoughts. I can't stop my mind. And the answer is always the same. Why? Why are you trying to? If you find that meditation or any of those methods is helpful in finding peace, if you find it useful, then there's no problem with that. If there is one technique that has the most potential to quiet the mind, it is to allow it to be. Allow thoughts to arise. Do not try to control them. No amount of mantras can drown out the noise of the mind. In the same way that in that exercise that we just had, a thought arose, and it could have been anything. It could have, it's always anything. It could have been like, when is this guy going to tell me something useful? Which would be great for the mind, because this is never enough for it. It always wants something else, something different, something more, something less. It always wants anything but this. But in the allowing thoughts to be, not labeling them as good or bad, positive or negative, with no, even allowing those thoughts that come up and say, I should be thinking more positive thoughts. I shouldn't be thinking these negative thoughts. When all thoughts arising are allowed to be, there can be a tendency for them to fall a little more into the background. And it doesn't mean that some don't have different levels of volume. A fuse was blown this morning, and so thoughts were like, well, this isn't a good time to do a talk. Let's do it another day. And another thought was, well, you haven't made one in a week, so we've got to do this. They weren't coming from me. I didn't come up with them. They just arose. And here we are. Allowing them to be means there's no resistance to them in one way or the other. And it's often said, well, some don't like hearing that we don't control our thoughts. Some don't like hearing we don't control our thoughts, and those thoughts are creating consistent suffering in their lives, and yet they want to believe that there's some element of control, and that the lack of control, there's a fear there. As if I would rather not believe. I'd rather believe that I control my thoughts when I don't, and have those thoughts create suffering in my life, than allow all of this to be. Because there's nothing else, there's no other way to go about it. You can't not allow everything to be as it is. But thoughts can arise that again, followed on by other thoughts that I need to follow this thing. I need to follow this thought about resistance. I need to fix this thought that I just had, which is just another thought. And around and around and around it goes. In the allowing of thoughts to arise, again, not labeling them as positive or negative, just seeing them as they are, and then making the note, oh, that's just a thought arising. That too is another thought. So you can see how they never really stop, yet the noting of it can remove some of that stickiness, the feeling that something should be figured out or followed, or the meaning behind something needs to be found. You don't quiet the mind. There is no method or technique that guarantees that the mind will be quiet, because the mind doesn't exist. It's just a bunch of thoughts. It's not a real thing. I mentioned the bowl of ice cream. You can't eat the thought ice cream, and yet I can go to the store and buy ice cream. But if the thoughts about the mind are referencing something real, where is it? Where is it? And some people say, well, it's inside your brain. And yet, if you like the scientific approach and attempts to talk about consciousness, you dig deep enough and you realize that they always get to the base point of like, well, we don't know. And we don't know, I don't know, is the beautiful mystery that is all of this. We know nothing. And the feeling that we can know something and should know something and can control our thoughts and should control our thoughts, it's folly. And ultimately, there's a feeling of lack. There's this feeling of emptiness in the idea that we can know everything, because we simply can't. You don't need to control your thoughts. You can't. But you can allow them to be. You can allow them to arise from nowhere to nowhere, which is exactly what's happening. And you may find that they get more quiet, that the noise that they create in your life gets softer. You find more peace and a more gentle approach to your day-to-day. There's no suggestion that you shouldn't meditate or do any of those other things. But allowing thoughts to arise, not trying to stop them or control them, is where peace can be found.